Hello, my Earth Angels. How are you? I am back with another dream, and I invite you to join me in interpreting it. So, feel free to sit back with a cozy cup of Earl Grey, and let's reflect on dreams together. In this dream, I was observing from basically a perspective of nowhere. It's like my perspective was floating above the scene in the sky, and I was nothing. And what I was watching was this outside park or trail. There was a paved sort of trail that a lot of people were riding their bicycles on, and there was greenery on either side, mostly just grass, but maybe some trees far off. And there was this little girl who was me. So this little girl had lots of big curly hair. She was dressed up in sort of feathers and beads and layers of clothing. She looked very fun and bohemian, and she just had the energy of a lot of spunk and charisma, and she was just the cutest. So she was riding on her bicycle, and then this man, who was kind of in this maybe striped t-shirt, I think it might have been yellow or something. He was also a quadriplegic, and he was sort of riding in his wheelchair, along with everyone who was on their bikes. And he turned around and came up toward her and started harassing her. And so what she did was she took her hands and she pushed his chest and she pushed him away. And then she sort of went off the trail onto the green part. She went off to her right and was going on the green, and I couldn't see her for a while, but the man who had been harassing her, who then had been pushed, he went over to this woman who also had curly hair. She was kind of shorter and kind of plump, and she was clearly sort of the person you would go to if you had complaints. And so he went to her complaining about the little girl. And so the woman then went to go on the grass and go to the little girl. She found her. So the girl was kind of a little bit bent over behind these two trees. It looked like she was doing something, but I don't know what she was doing. And the woman came over, but didn't necessarily talk to the girl. But the woman took with her hands, she uprooted a tree. It was like a sapling, I guess. It was like a short tree, but it had kind of this cloth that was holding the roots and tied together. And she took it, and I think that she might have intended to throw it on the ground, but I'm not exactly sure. But at this moment, the little girl, what appeared in her hands was a bow and arrow. So I'll come back to that. I'll come back to a lot of things. So the woman instructed the little girl to take her bow and arrow and shoot it sort of in kind of up into the air just a little bit, so it would come back down and hit the ground. And so she did, but the arrow, when it was in the air, turned into this kind of thick green, it was a light green color, and I can't really explain what it is. It almost looked like dynamite, but like with a cone on the end or something. And then so when it hit the ground, it made a crater, a shallow crater that was a perfect circle. And then the little girl took her bow and arrow. She got back on her bicycle and she went back the way she was going to go. She continued on, but she continued on in the grass. And as she got further and further away, I heard a male voice narrate as if like in a movie, saying something like, "This little girl was strong-willed and something I can't exactly remember. It was something positive about her sort of fiery personality." And then the narrator said, "But when she grew up in a society where she was worn down by the male gaze." And then that was it. So, what do you make of this? I think that, every character and every figure in a dream is a part of the psyche and the self. And I think this little girl symbolizes me when I was younger, maybe all of us, and all of the sort of energy and the sort of intense kind of selfhood that we come into the world, potentially with to bloom. And I think that even if we have sort of Willicott's good enough parents, and we would describe our childhood as quite lovely, I think that there are ways that family, society, teachers, churches, just the human condition in general, shapes a child, that the outcome is kind of taming the self, maybe the challenges of life. So kind of squelching the self, or trying to, so that we don't necessarily grow up naturally and free. So basically, I think the man who comes to harass the girl, he might represent an animus, a masculine part of my psyche, and the masculine would represent the logos, effort, kind of the yang energy, the productive, logical, networking, strategic, kind of active force that's within us all. And I think his sort of embodiment symbolizes of a masculine part of my psyche that has had to push through and navigate the world, but with a big challenge, like this challenge of, it could represent kind of anything, but kind of determination, but through challenge. And so, but this animus, because he's harassing the girl, I think he has maybe, even though he's done well, and maybe with his tasks, he feels resentment, and he hasn't been able to develop emotional maturity because he's kind of stuck, maybe even in survival mode, in a sense. And so, which, maybe doesn't make sense because he's out in the sun enjoying his day, and there's kind of like, it's a day in the park, but just kind of like trying to think about parts of our soul and how we might work and achieve and seek but be tired. So I think the little girl immediately she goes off track. So she no longer is riding her bike with everyone. She's going off because of this interaction. She's going off to ride in the grass. So already, society is kind of not, I was going to say pushed her, but that kind of sounds like, I don't think it's like a victim kind of thing. I think it's just natural, the natural way that we adjust, but also as children, we are resilient. Regardless of what happens to us, we can figure out how to go forward and be as fine as possible. So I think this is a very positive thing. She goes into the grass and she goes near two trees. And the woman, I think, even though the man complains to her, the woman goes over to the child. She didn't have like a punishing or policing or any kind of negative energy. She had the energy of a part of the psyche that was just going to balance what was out of order. So I think when she takes the sapling and uproots the tree, this symbolizes, all of us at the point where we no longer are growing just in like our healthy natural ways. We, have to learn how to be polite or be good, you know, little kids, little boys and girls. And, this could be just simple things like, don't say that to that grown up, or make sure that you are well dressed and clean when you go to school, or make sure you hug your family member when they come in or they give you a present, or anything that, instructs us to do something we wouldn't naturally do. And of course, we have to be civilized in our society and grow up, etc. And so, maybe this happens to all of us. But then what happens is that the little girl gets a bow and arrow. And so when I think about bows and arrows, I think about, of course, they could be made of anything, but in this situation, I think that they were made out of wood from the tree. So you can no longer be a tree that's just growing in the wild, but we can fashion something from the tree for you to help you protect yourself and navigate the world. And so that's what happens. And so I think the woman then instructs the girl to shoot. It's like her first arrow that she shoots into the ground. In the circle, the shallow crater, Jung, I think, would say that any kind of circle is representative of the self. It's like a mandala and a symbol of wholeness. And so I think it symbolizes that, even though we have to divert and maybe even stifle some of our fiery spirit when we're younger, there is still a self there. Even if you had to endure some kind of trauma when you were a child, some psychologists say that, well, you might not have been able to build a self or construct a self because you were surviving. And that certainly might be true. I don't know. But I would like to think that there's a self that we come in with into the earth, and we're born with this, and we can, when we're once again in kind of a safe environment, we can sort of remember and rediscover and meet, this person who we are. So I feel like I'm sort of doing this now. For so long, I was not aware of inner work or shadow work or anything like that. I was sort of a sensation junkie. I wanted to gather as many experiences as I could, and I wanted to escape from my dysfunctional family. And I think it was when I came to more knowledge about what might be happening inside of my family, like labeling and naming that dysfunction, and then finally making the choice to go no contact. I could then divert the energy that I was using to keep as much peace and autonomy as I could in my life. I could reposition that energy to working on myself and doing the shadow work. And, it was no longer, what's wrong with this relationship and this dynamic? And it shifted to what's wrong with me? What can I change about myself to, evolve and grow? And for a while it felt like my personality was just a series of trauma responses. And I think, a big part of that is true, or was true. And now, I did worry that, and I did feel like there was nothing there within me, that I didn't have a self. I didn't feel like I had a self, and I didn't know how it would feel. I could say what I, did for a job and what I liked to do, but none of that really felt very grounded. And it scared me. But I think very, very recently, I've slowly been uncovering things that feel like me. And, I guess I don't really know how to articulate it so much, but you're just gonna have to take my word for it. I won't go into it too much, but anyway, I think that it's a nice idea that, like some spiritualists say, that you have a soul and it can never be corrupted. It's always perfect. And some may call this even your higher self or something. But I think that there is a self that you can access in the here and now, and it is undamaged. It, we evolve, and maybe we become a version of ourselves because of our environment and circumstances. But there are, I think, parts of ourselves that are here from the very beginning, and some of us may be able to keep hold of it as we grow, but others of us, it may be in hiding until, like I said, we get into that safe environment. And so I think that, the little girl writing, and I see her, she's writing with passion and intensity, and she is going fast, and she is, maybe just going fast for the love of it, or maybe there is some kind of fire under her. But I think the narrator saying that, she was worn down by the male gaze, I don't think that's men or, the quote-unquote patriarchy. I think it is, again, the symbolic kind of pressures that society puts on all of us to be successful, to work, to consider ourselves a failure if we didn't check all the boxes of tasks we needed to do in the day. It's about producing to the point of burnout. I can give you examples in academia. I'm sure you can give me examples if you were outside of academia, whatever career you have chosen, whatever roles you have chosen. In academia, I think that for professors, at four-year universities, they feel like they have to keep producing, right? Publish or perish. And you published your first book, But that's not enough because your colleagues have already published like 8 books. And so you have to do another and another. And it's like, what are you working on? And I've had friends that work in 4-year universities and they are just tired. They don't really have time to eat well or work out or do anything because you have to, it's never enough, you know? And then I think of maybe those of us who are in community colleges, we're not paid very much. So, you know, like for instance, this semester I taught 9 classes over a college and a university, which I can't be the best professor to all of those students, but I have to work that much to take care of myself, to pay my rent and make sure I have food in the kitchen. And it's like no one else is gonna, you know, pay anything for me. Like I have to do it myself. And so that's how much I need to work in order to gain the salary that meets the cost of living. And I'm not complaining about it. I love it. I've chosen it. It gives me life. Like there's no other job I want to do. But it's still, it can burn you out, you know? And so like how sustainable are any of our jobs, right? I think a lot of people have to work 2 jobs to make it, and they're still living paycheck to paycheck. So I think it's this, I think that, you know, for some of us, we might look at our childhood experiences and say, well, that really tamed or wore down the self, you know, and now I have to parent myself. I have to work on my mother-father complexes, whatever it is. But I think we can forget, maybe not all of us, maybe for some of us this is very clear, but for those of us who have particularly had challenging childhood and teenage experiences, I think we can forget that the world also can kind of carve us out in certain ways. And we have to really be intentional and work at balancing the masculine and feminine, or the yin and yang within us. Find ways to breathe and to pause and to create and to play without sort of any goal in mind. And, you know, I mean, like the Bible says to enter the kingdom of heaven, be like a child. And I think children, that's what they do. They play, and they don't think, well, I have to play so many hours in a day to become smart or to gain these skills. They are just playing and exploring, and they're doing it for just the reason of joy and delight. And I think that, you know, especially in 2025, we're doom scrolling. We don't have time to play. Maybe even our hobbies might be achievement oriented or production oriented, you know. And so, you know, like lately, I just started actually this last week or so, I asked myself, you know, why am I not listening to Portuguese music? Because I have like a few artists like Roberto Campos, and I don't know how to say his name, Tiago York maybe, that I just like love. And I love just listening to the language. I don't know why, it does something in my brain that like tickles it and makes it feel good. So I just listen to it and I have no idea what it's saying, but that's almost, I think, a part of it. I just think the Portuguese language is beautiful, but like, why am I not listening to it? And I think because, if I'm going to listen to a podcast or music or try to go on Duolingo or learn a language, I should spend my time learning a language that I want to be fluent in because it's important, like, and I love those languages too, but I tend to like shelve something like Portuguese. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to listen to it because I like it, not because I'm trying to learn the language, but because I enjoy the sound of it. It gives me good energy. And I'm not the best or the most creative person, but I do sometimes do process painting and, dance in my apartment. And I'd like to think of more things to do. But I'm trying, I'm trying to put my tech up at night and read books without looking at my phone and, be lonely and be bored. And again, I'm addicted to technology and social media. And so I don't think I really do this consistently or well, but it's something I'm trying to do. And it feels like you kind of have to fight against the system because the system is just making all of these self-destructive habits so tempting. So I don't know. What do you think about my dream? Do you have other interpretations? Let me know.